I will call this meeting to order. This is the August 19th meeting of the Newcastle Planning Commission. I'm Charlie Gazik, the chair. Would you join me as we salute the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Commissioner Marsh.
Here.
Commissioner Quigg.
Here.
Commissioner Gack.
Here.
Commissioner Lowe.
Here.
Commissioner Van Atta.
Here.
And Chair Ketzik.
Here.
All right.
Okay, the agenda is in front of all of you. You've seen it. Does anybody have any changes or amendments to the agenda? Okay, I'm seeing no heads nodding yes, so we will consider that approved. We will move to commissioner comments, and I'm going to start the comments tonight. I would like to welcome our newest commissioner, Vanita Kack. We're very excited to have her join us. I've had the pleasure of meeting with Vanita now a couple of times. She brings a great background where she's been a banker for many years with U.S. Bank, and her clientele was cities, so she knows something about government, which she'll bring to us. And she fills the seat of the commissioner that in all my time I thought was the best prepared commissioner we've ever had. And so they're big shoes to fill, but based on what I've seen of Vanita Kack so far, she is prepared. So she's going to hit the ground running. So welcome, Vanita. I want to thank Brian Kennard, who unfortunately had to resign. He was our vice chair. He'd been with us for several years, and he was also a fabulous commissioner. He was thoughtful. He brought some great experience with understanding of how retailers view land use and seek opportunities in the community. And so we will miss him. And thank you, Brian, if you are going to watch this. That means that we have an opening for the vice chair. And so if anybody would like to indicate interest, wants to know more about it, please reach out to me. I will tell you that it's not a very demanding role. Primarily, you sit in as chair if the chair is not present. However, if you think you might ever want to be the chair, it's a great way to heighten your attention to what the chair does, so you start to think about it before you're actually put in that position. And last, I'd like to welcome not a commissioner, but a soon-to-be commissioner, Stu Blocker, who is in the audience this evening, raised his hand there. Stu will be confirmed at tomorrow's council meeting, and I'm excited to have Stu join us too. He's had a long and distinguished career with the Department of Natural Resources, where he retired as the Assistant Regional Manager of the Olympic Peninsula. He was very involved in forestry. He was a major player in Tiger Mountain Park becoming a state park. So, and he knows about comprehensive plans. So he will be a great addition, starting probably in October, because he will be traveling in September, but we will see him soon. With that, I will invite other commissioners to comment if you'd like to.
I just wanted to take a moment and echo the welcome to Stu and Vanita, and also just to send along regards to Brian Kennard. He was an absolute treasure to be part of the Planning Commission. I really enjoyed getting to know him and work alongside of him, and he definitely brought a perspective that always added value. So, Brian, again, if you're listening, we're going to miss having you on the panel here.
I graduated high school back in '91 and proudly got in the University of Washington before the standards went up much, much higher now, because I know what it takes to get in there. And I feel that way about this Planning Commission, because when I got on the Planning Commission, you didn't need this resume that these two have, clearly. This is a little intimidating, so welcome aboard, both you guys. Can't wait to work with you. Brian, great guy. pleasure to work with. He would come and kind of, remember the TV show Columbo, kind of golly gee shucks, by the way, and he'd make these great comments. He was always very, humble and just a sweet guy, and I really learned a lot from him, so I'll miss him greatly, but welcome aboard to both you guys.
Welcome, first off. And Brian, if you are listening, I echo these things, but also I hope to see you on the ski slopes this winter. And then something about the comp plan. No, it's a good thing. It's not perfect, but it has come miles from what we saw last time. And I know that was a lot of the city's hard work, so thank you.
That concludes the commissioner comments. We will open the floor to public comment. If you have a comment, approach the podium. Let us know your name and where neighborhood you're from, and speak.
Hi, I'm Peggy Price, 9131 122nd Place Southeast, Newcastle. And I just wanted to clarify one thing that I'd sent you information already, and one thing I goofed up on was I was saying something about a Hillside Park Trail. I should have said the Hillside Park segment of the 84th Street Trail. Other than that, I think we're good. Thank you very much for this amazing work you guys are doing.
Good evening. My name is Carol Simpson, and tomorrow I'll be a resident of the Cedar Rim Apartments in Newcastle, and maybe you know where those are. They're down at the foot of the hill behind Dino's, across the street from the daycare center and McDonald's and Starbucks. I'd ask Aaron if I hadn't prepared ahead of time to ask Aaron to show the land use map and to show the third place areas that are highlighted in the land use map. But I was surprised to see the Cedar Rim Apartments, which are also being changed name to Lakeview Apartments, shaded in as pink as a third place for Newcastle. Well, that's going to be really hard to do with over 100 apartments already on that property. And it's very steep slope, and there's no parking, and there's no street improvement along there. So that's an inappropriate designation for that property. And for the people who do live there, we already have a third place. Like I said, there's a Dino's, a Starbucks, McDonald's, nail salons, daycare, everything you almost want, except a good grocery store. Already checked out the convenience store. The cookies are about $9 a packet, so that's ridiculous to go there. Anyway, I still am not totally comfortable with the comprehensive plan, especially when you talk about open space. There's a lot of open spaces in our city that are not highlighted on the map, that have disappeared. And when you do the calculation, there is no level of service specifically for open space, but we're losing open space according to that map. It's not a zone. Open space is not a zone. The city has a limited use open space zone presently in our zoning code. It's not the same, because under the limited use open space, you can have a golf course, you can have a hotel, you can have, I think, a civic use, some other things that are allowed in that use, like the maintenance facility in Lake Warren Park. It's not the same as open space. We're losing out. So take a look at your mapping, because we've lost a lot of open space where there are some trails. They're not highlighted on the current map. So there's a lot of other uses. Schools are designated as a use, but that's mainly a civic use. But that could be grouped together with hospitals, libraries, City Hall as a civic use, instead of just calling out schools as a use on your map. So consider those things, please. Thank you.
Okay, it appears that everyone in the audience who wants to speak has had an opportunity to speak, so we will close the public comment period and move to general business, which is continuation of our discussion of the comprehensive plan. And to kind of recap where we have been and where we are, the consultants provided initial drafts of a revised comprehensive plan some weeks ago. Part of their charge was to not only update the plan, but to reorganize it and rewrite it so it was easier to follow, had minimized the repetition, was better, more accessible to the average citizen. Their initial drafts, we looked at them and we offered comment and we asked for some substantial additional work. They went back, did that work, submitted those drafts. We have reviewed what we have seen so far, and tonight we will be going through those to hear what commissioners have to say about the work at the present stage. So what I'm proposing is that we will start with the introduction and land use element, and then continue with other elements as time allows. But with each element, I'll just ask an open question for the commissioners for your overall feedback about it, not specific point by point, but just your overall reaction to it. And then after commissioners have had a chance to answer that, I'll ask for you to comment on things that you think need to be addressed still, either changes or gaps, but things that are substantive as opposed to style, no typos, no spacing, things that are, those comments, we do want those, but let's not use our talk time for that. Let's send those electronically to the staff and they can address those. So how does that sound as an approach, commissioners? Okay? All right. Well, then let's begin with, let me stop here a second, because normally we have a part on the agenda where the director can give a report and the chair can give a report, so we won't call this a report, but I would like to have the director talk about where we are, just the way I did now, and address what I may have overlooked or things that are important that she thinks we should be thinking about.
Thank you, Chair Gatzik. I think for the most part, the comprehensive plan, when we're looking at this is really, as mentioned, this is substantive changes that we're looking for. Individual comments can be provided on typos and the nitty-gritty later, or directly to me. I think we're looking to understand if this provides enough information so that we can move forward with what you have seen, this very detailed table for the policies, of course, which will be important, the goals and policies. So, of course, we're still in draft form, and you can see that there are formats that need to be changed. Did we miss any consistency between each element? Did we hit all of the vision statements that we heard? Do you see continuity across the whole document? Just does the document start to flow and make sense? So that's, I think we're getting closer to that on, especially this written portion. The Exhibit 2 draft, which was this policy crosswalk table, we do have SCJ on the line, but just to give you a little background on this, I started the crosswalk with just what you see as column D here and column F, column D, the one on the left. Those are all the goals and policies from our current 2035 plan. And then F is everything that was provided in the 2044 draft. And then there are color coding that indicate whether the red is that it has, this specific wording is no longer in the plan. There's this golden color, which means it was moved to a different location, and this blue color means it's still in the plan, in the same section. And then there are notes in this document from SCJ. In the first two columns, is this a GMA requirement? Do we have to have this addressed? PSRC, same idea. And then actual notes about the changes. And there's even a couple additional notes in here. So hopefully you were able to get through this to some degree. I don't know how much time we'll have to talk about this part tonight, but I think as we move on from the comp plan language, that's really going to be our next focus, is to get these goals and policies hammered out.
We will take time, maybe for that section, maybe not to get into the detailed comments, but I want to hear some general reactions about that. And we all, and our consultants are on the line with us, and there will be, or there may be some light that they will shine on it while they're present as well. So we'll start with the elements like I described, but we'll make sure that we turn to this before we run out of time so that commissioners get a fuller picture of how that section works and have a chance to give at least their initial impressions of it. Okay, so any questions at this point? Yeah.
So I'm new to this, so I was just reading through and I could be totally wrong. Under land use and community, this is on page 22, it talks about safety. When my first read of it, as somebody who's, looking at the draft for the first time, you're not clear on what we are proposing to address for the residents. They're concerned with respect to well-lit streets and pedestrian safety and crime prevention. I'm not sure if there's it does say there's an attachment somewhere where, there's more information, but it's just that because of the concern that the residents, the constituents have for safety, I just thought that perhaps we could probably add something more there, which is more specific as to what we would be doing. Thank you.
So there's a reason why there's not more, and commissioners jump in to expand on my answer, but it's so important that it needs a whole lot more. And we talked about having a whole new element, just like transportation and housing, on public safety. And we concluded that we could not give it justice within the time frame that we had, because it really goes, there are some things that are within the scope of the comprehensive plan, which is mainly dealing with land use, but a lot more things that get into staffing levels of the police and how the police are deployed. And so we opted to not to address it, but in conversations with the council, we know that the council is going to address it, and a councilman has already, initiated a panel of citizen advisors to work on it. So it's not that we don't recognize the importance, it's that we felt we couldn't do it justice in this current process, and so we put it on its own track, essentially.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think also I would agree with everything you said, Chair Gatzik, and I would also say, I think the way that I've looked at the narrative piece of this is that, keeping in mind that this is not a legislative document, but it's a guidance document, and there are going to be goals and policies that are going to be integrated throughout that address safety. The intent here, I think, is to tee this up as a concept in the plan without explaining specific things that will be done. Because one of the things we don't want to do in the comp plan is create an unintended mandate for specific ordinances or legislation, because that's really the purview of the council and not ours. So that's my take on why this is higher level as well.
I will give my perspective with the story, as I like to do. We did the penny poll. We went to the Arts Council thing, whatever, last summer, like long ago. Is that what it was? There's a great picture of Scott and me from that. Handsome. And there wasn't a jar for put your penny in for safety. And people kept on asking, where do I put the thing for the police? Where do I put the thing for crime? Where do I put the thing? Oh, I'm like, this is stupid. I mean, people keep on asking, we keep on making excuses. Let's just give them a dang jar, right? So the next thing we had a jar. And sure enough, safety was like the winner of all the petty polls. And so I was like, do we need a safety element? I mean, we have an element for land use, we have an element for transportation, we have all this other stuff. So we don't have one right now. It wasn't for lack of trying. It was a hotly debated topic, during and after meetings. But I love that you asked that. I love that your first question out of the gate was that question, because I think that is the hottest thing on people's minds. It's something that came up in all the, conversations, not all, but a lot of the conversations we had. So to the extent you can be here and help us flesh that out, I love it. So welcome aboard. Thank you so much. Where were you 4 months ago?
Okay, so overall impressions to the land use element and the introduction, actually, both those things. Yeah, Commissioner Marsh.
So my focus has been on the narrative piece, and I haven't done the deep dive. I really want to spend some time going through the matrix, and I'll admit I'm not prepared to speak to that in detail today, because my focus has been on the drafted component. I feel, I want to echo what I've already heard here. I think it is much closer to what we were hoping it would look like. I think there are some things that I still have some specific questions about, and I do intend to, I can provide some feedback directly, Aaron, as you suggested, to the extent that it doesn't come up in conversations today, but I feel like it is moving more in the right direction. I guess I would stress that there are some places where I feel that there is some language nuance, and I feel like there is some focus on things that maybe skews, not, the safety is actually a good example. Safety is an important issue in the community right now, and I think I agree that it could be more broadly stated with a different element. I think that there are things that are noted in the land use, in particular, I think the section on community nodes that I think still are somewhat overstated based on the amount of conversation we had internally here at the Planning Commission and how much that was a part of our process. So I guess I'll sum up by saying I'm really trying to think about this holistically. I think it is much better. I think there still are some things like that we can fine tune, but I'm pleased to see the improvements.
Yeah, a couple of comments. On the safety element, I think it's in the land use section right now. Is that correct? Doing this from memory, yeah. I mean, should it, if the future of it is its own element, should it maybe not be like higher up, like in the vision statement or something, that this is kind of where we're headed, and not put it in land use? Just a thought to chew on. And then the other thing I noticed just in general is I read through land use, and generally I really liked how it read. And then the next one was housing. And housing started off with repeating the RCW language, whereas land use didn't really have much mention of RCW. And then it got to, I think, trails, which has like a table of contents, like 5.1, 5.2. So as you go between the sections, they seem like land use seemed to be a little more like holistic in its description, and like it's more visionary. And then the further chapters, and this could just be a time thing, but it just seemed like they got a little more, I don't know, to the meat of it. I would like to see, I guess, trails and housing and all the other chapters be like brought up a little bit. And, you know, get them out of the weeds. They felt too weedy to me, to how they started. Does that make any sense? Yeah. Okay. And then I got one other question on nodes. So I know the nodes are in here. I guess, have we as a commission decided to put nodes in the comp plan? I feel like we never voted on it. And we either need to like vote on it and put it in or take it out. What?
I thought that we had had conversation in one of the last, if not the last meeting, one of the more recent meetings, where we discussed that we had not made any decisions about nodes and it had come late to the party, and that it was going to be noted in here as a concept that was available for further explanation or exploration, excuse me, between now and the next comp plan.
Yeah.
So I thought that we had decided and agreed as a commission to do that, although I could be mistaken.
Well, but the way it's in this draft, I mean, it's a thing, right? It's on the land use. It's in a few different areas, so I think we need to decide what to do with it, I guess.
I love that comment. I love your two comments. A, anytime safety gets higher, you know, up in the comp plan, I think that's a great thing. So I think it reflects what everybody keeps on telling us. That's their big concern. To have that kind of, as you said, hidden in the weeds when over and over again, and in the surveys, they kept on saying, what about this? You know, crime and police levels of service, I think is what Carol Simpson kept on, you know, I think to the extent we can do that poll is a great idea. I think your comment on nodes is also kind of in that same lane of, does this really reflect the conversations we've had here and also what we've been hearing in terms of feedback around third places or nodes? And that's another thing. Are we going to call it third places? Are we going to call it nodes? I guess they're probably not the same thing. I've been trying to study them. I think we need to do as best we can to just reflect what we're hearing from the people that come to the open houses and talk to us, to the comments. I read all those comments, and there were some very strong opinions on both sides. And even if there were some really strong comments on nodes, I love them. If there wasn't a significant number of people saying, you know, they like the idea, it's kind of hard to put that in, like Scott said at the last second. So I agree on safety. I agree on nodes. And just in general, my final comment before I turn off my mic is I just want to make sure our guiding light is always what we're hearing from the residents, that we're always trying to reflect back what we hear from the people, whether living in apartments or in single-family fancy houses up in the reserve, whoever they are. If they're filling out their surveys, if they're providing feedback to us, I just think that we should make this document reflect what the residents say today. So I agree. I think if we get safety kind of more prominence in the comp plan, I think it'd be appreciated by the people that I've been listening to.
I have a couple comments. I know we put a lot of time on those documents, and there are multiple revisions. And the one thing I noticed is I think there are some of the topics we, as notes as example, we discussed, but doesn't, I guess, exactly reflected what we discussed in the document. And also I noticed is there are like some newer concept into the revisions. One example is on the introduction. There is a terminology used is, I think it's in page 5, smaller scale residential neighborhoods. I don't really recall we discussed, or I couldn't really articulate what do we mean smaller scale. And in the document later on, there's also reference, it's a smaller scale single family units. So I don't exactly know, is this a new concept of a housing type, or it's something different? That's one example in terms of feel like there's some new concept, new terminology introduced in the document. Another is, I think when we talk about housing, we very briefly touched the manufacturing home. I thought we said we are not putting that in our neighborhood, but
Is that in here?
yes. No, there are multiple places about the manufacturing home. I think there is also, I don't have the page right down, but there is a place is like a city for the surplus, or yeah, I think that is one area, right? Is this? So nevertheless, I guess I would like get some clarification in terms of what we want the city to do, or what the city plan to do in terms of the manufacturing home. And there's also government assisted housing project. I think that's the word. In the past, I think document did say in the past, we, City of Newcastle, participate or contribute like financial resource. I think that's ARCH. And my interpretation reading that, it seems like we are encouraging to actually participate, or right, and identify the place or that. So again, maybe I missed something. I don't necessarily recall we discussed that before. So, Chair, I'm just kind of saying like my observation after reading those documentation feel like those the new terminology or new approach, I would like us to discuss a little bit further. And another comment, I know the guidance, the guidelines, really, the comprehensive plan, it's a concurrent plan. So in another way, I have transportation element, and I think from the survey, public safety and traffic are basically the top two things on people's mind. And also there is concern with the growth. Will we basically see that traffic getting worse, or our level of service being deteriorated? And the transportation element specifically, it doesn't necessarily really, it's not necessarily any action in terms of what we are going to do to accommodate the growth, but more so like we pretty much don't need to do anything. And I will think at least we probably need to acknowledge there will be a challenge, there will be a pressure in our infrastructure transportation system, as an example, when we have those anticipated target growth.
Well, hold those comments on the transportation plan, because that element, when we get to it, we'll
Yeah.
dig into that
Yeah,
in
yeah,
detail.
I'm just using this as an example when we think of the concurrent plan overall. I think also there's some kind of a little bit more detail in terms of if we correctly reflect some of the survey results. I think we touched it earlier.
Does anybody have any additional comments about their overall reaction to the introduction and the land use element?
Overall, I guess I would like to respond, and close me down if I'm going off topic, but I would like to respond to the comments about safety, and particularly looking at the introduction. You know, the introduction, as it's drafted, it sets up for, you know, the future projections, explains what the purpose of the plan is and how to use it, and then it speaks to public involvement. And the very first key engagement takeaway talks about public safety and traffic among the most prominent concerns expressed about growth. So it is highlighted as the first issue identified in the public involvement. And I think taking then the next step to look at the community vision, which is an aspirational broad brush summary of community objectives. The statement, the vision is Newcastle is a safe, welcoming, family-friendly, and vibrant city with abundant open spaces and trails. And I think the fact that safety is listed, is noted as the first concern there, or the first aspirational component of what, or characteristic of our city. I mean, I feel like we need to, in the introduction, in the vision, acknowledge, recognize the importance of safety and the feedback. There's also a certain level of balance that we've got to strike here, because as important as safety is in the feedback we got a lot of feedback about a lot of other things too that are important to people that live here. And I want to make sure we don't lose track of that as we discuss incorporating one specific theme or one specific idea across all of these other components. I mean, the elements are separate elements for a reason. So I guess I personally feel like the balance that we have in both the vision statement and in the introduction is appropriate. Independent is a question of whether or not there could be another element for that. So I'm not sure I would do a whole lot more to try and elevate that.
How about just moving it from land use into the introduction, though? Right now, the safety paragraph is in the land use element, I'm pretty sure.
It is, because I think it's speaking specifically to SEPTED and other specific types of measures. I mean, I guess my view, and I may be in the minority on this, but you know, when we talk about issues that were identified by the community in the public involvement section, I think there is a paragraph there about public safety and traffic as being one of the most prominent concerns. So I think it's represented there. But I mean, if people feel like it's more appropriate to have an entire, you know, subsection about safety in the introduction, that's a discussion we could have.
Okay, well, we very quickly moved from overall reactions to comments about specific things. We have a number of things we can go back to now. Let's stay with safety for a second. What I heard Scott say was that in the land use sections, the safety thing talks about SEPTED, which is the land use aspect. So that seems appropriate to me anyway for it to stay there, but it also seems appropriate to me that we might add to the introduction to kind of reflect some of the conversation we just had here about why there's not an element for public safety and what is happening and why and maybe sort of an explanation of why you're not seeing all of that concern that you raised earlier in the year in the comprehensive plan. It's because it's going to appear elsewhere, but something that shows Newcastle that the city government heard them and has not dropped the ball. Does that sound like a solution Okay.
How would we integrate that here?
I don't know. Aaron?
So our current, I mean, we could lean into that a little bit in some of these statements. Especially where we talk about, because the vision is, here we talk about safety under the social fabric. But I think one is to put it in the policies for the land use. That'll give more specific directives to consider a future safety element in the plan or other types of, we talked about this before. Actually, I think we came up specifically with specific language for this a few months ago, but it was, those kinds of directives go in the policies and implementation plan. So I would put that there. Anything about future planning for XYZ. If we want to bring up what we heard, we could, key engagement takeaways. We could add a little bit more to that.
Yeah, I would add a paragraph right there, just saying what the city is doing about public safety. There's so many things, I mean, there's so much that was talked about and is yet to come to fruition. And I think if we just talk about how the commission and the city council have picked up on this and are acting on it, that would help present a better complete picture of, and so.
And Aaron, a picture's worth 1,000 words, right? Ever since I've lived here, I can't turn on Facebook without seeing a picture of Chief Hauk or Chief Steve right at the top. There's got to be a picture we could put in there, maybe. I mean, we have pictures of plants, we have pictures of rocks, maybe a picture of one of their 7,000 visits with the kids, handing out lollipops or something. Maybe that would highlight it a little. I don't know.
Okay, let's move on to another topic. Maggie, some of the things that you mentioned that we had not talked about. There is a lot in the comprehensive plan that we did not talk about. And it appears, a lot of that appears in the policies section, which is got a lot of detail, which I don't know that any of us have really fully absorbed. But a lot of what is there is a carryover from the existing comprehensive plan. And I think manufactured housing is an example of that. So we didn't talk about it, it didn't come up, but nobody flagged it as a concern. And that's not the same as talking about it, but that process was set up so that we identified the things that we thought ought to be changed. And if it didn't come up as something that ought to be changed, we left it the way it was. That doesn't mean we can't change it now, because every time we go through this, we're peeling away another layer of the onion, and so it's appropriate that we give it scrutiny. But I think that's why some of the things that you mentioned that we didn't talk about are in here, and I think they're mostly in the policies. Arch is another example. That's something that the city has supported, and I don't think the new plan is suggesting any different level of support. It doesn't specify any level of support. It just says it continues to be a strategy. So I think when we use a new term like moderate scale housing, I think it's appropriate that we explain what that term means. So and I'm hoping the staff can see to that detail.
Yeah, and
if you recall the conversation on what to call our neighborhoods or how to describe them, I think smaller scale is a way to, the single-family home sized buildings is the smaller scale, which is what we've been talking about all along. I think there's some redundancy, Mag, in what Commissioner Lowe mentioned about the something being small scale, single family. It should just be small scale, and that's a replacement term there.
Yeah. It'd be good, though, if when we use those terms, to just have a parenthetical definition so that it's clear what we're referring to.
Clear, yeah.
Maggie said something I just want to see if we're on the same page. Is smaller, because I got it right here on page, whatever it is, 5 on my little PDF. Equitable access to green spaces, trails, and smaller scale residential neighborhoods. So that's not tiny houses, right? That's not tiny houses. Okay, that's it. All right. That may have been where the confusion is. Like to Charlie's point, we got to define what we're talking about.
Okay, now a comment not about a specific issue, but about how I think it would be good for us to review these elements. In the elements, there are a lot of comments that those commissioners who have reviewed them and edited put comments in. So I'll take land use as an example. Commissioner Marsh made several insertions. He had questions. Almost all of which I thought were really good adds. And so as we go through that, unless somebody objects to those adds, I'm going to interpret that as meaning you endorse those. And so if you endorse them, we don't need to talk about them. You can assume that those will be made. If there's something that you have a different view of than Commissioner Marsh, and you'd like to express that, let's talk about those. But I think you can think of the edits as being givens unless somebody objects to them. So that's a process point, and it just reminds me of another point when we were talking about nodes. The nodes paragraph was edited, a lot of it, on my version at least, there's a lot that was cut out of it. And when I reread it just a minute ago, I didn't see what some of you are seeing as a overemphasis. It just seemed to me like that paragraph said, here's nodes, and this is something you could deal with in future comprehensive plans. So to me, it was in line with the importance that we had given it as a commission. So I'd encourage you to read that paragraph again and see if you still think that it's overemphasized.
May I respond now?
Yeah.
Is this good time? So she mentioned, safety maybe is not prominent enough. Paul's like, maybe we should put it up. I may be missing something. I can't remember it all, but this is the community node section right here, and I think it's given the same amount of space as the safety section. I'm probably wrong. I'm probably missing something. You'll correct me 14 times, but I guess, because it did come up kind of late, right? Safety's been around all along, but the nodes thing is something I literally had to look up because I didn't know what it was when it came up in a meeting. So, if it's got more prominence than safety, then it's obviously probably outsized compared to where it should be. But if it has less prominence than what everybody cares most about, because there's a special section for nodes which shows like a picture of a node, and we don't have my picture of Chief Kajihiro. So maybe, if we get a bigger picture of the chief, maybe it makes sense, but I'm just kidding, Erin. So what do you think about that?
I see what you're saying, and I'll just note that this draft has already incorporated some of the changes, a lot of the changes that we received by last Friday, and then some additional ones since then. But and we do have Mr. Qualls on the line if he has some thoughts about this discussion. I will say community nodes in third places is something that the Community Activities Commission is also currently reviewing. And this can also be things like community centers. So it is something that has been talked about for a very long time. in the city, especially with the community center idea. And then with safety, I guess and I don't know if Aaron has additional ideas, but if we wanted to add anything more to this, do you have thoughts on that?
Before we go to Aaron, I just noticed that my version of community nodes is different than what you're showing on the screen. So mine's shorter. It doesn't appear, the one that you're showing on the screen doesn't reflect the edits that are in mine. And I think the edits came from Scott and from me.
Some of my edits. I think some of my edits got picked up and some of them didn't, is what it looks like, which I assume that there was a reason for that.
There was, yes. I just haven't had an opportunity, but I felt that some of them took out descriptors that were useful. But we haven't had an opportunity to talk about that with staff. And that's another question is, how do staff weigh in and have a conversation with planning commissioners on these things? So, but,
This is a very difficult process. We're editing as a group, and we're editing in a way where we can only really discuss it in a public meeting where we have 2 or 3 hours at most to do it, and there's a whole lot of work. So there's going to be some friction, not in terms of argument, but just inefficiencies. And so, and a good case is, so not all the edits that we submitted necessarily were made in the draft, and there's probably good reason for that. I think if we're going to get through this, we're going to have to pick those up in the next round of edits and maybe have staff note where they want to bring it to our attention, where there's some changes that we proposed that they did not think were wise, so we can hear their explanation. I had another thought, but I can't remember what it was. So does somebody else have something they want to jump in with while I'm thinking?
I had asked Aaron Qualls about additional discussion of the safety element, if there are things that we could add to it.
Okay, let's go to that. Hello, Aaron.
Good evening. Well, first, thank you all so much for your patience with us, and I'm glad to hear we're finally getting somewhere. So a couple of notes, if you don't mind. The land use section, we kind of retitled it Land Use and Community Design, just to better reflect some of the discussion about the CEPTED principles, and also to reflect the previous work that the city has done on with regards to the downtown and what that could look like at some point. So with regards in that portion, which is just after the introduction, where we did incorporate public safety into the overall vision statement. One thought I had is listening to you is that we don't have we're calling it a vision element. We have one on the economy, the social fabric, mobility, housing, heritage, identity, public facilities and services, which, relates to facilities, which relates to public safety, but we don't have one for public safety. So we're happy to, craft something specific to public safety as a sub-vision element, or maybe bake it into the public facilities and services a little stronger, if that would help. Real quick, thank you for that patch on smaller scale residential and a reread of that. That could probably use some word tweaking. I can understand why you might think tiny homes or even apartments, smaller spaces. So that could probably use a little bit of reworking there. And I might punt the node discussion a little bit more to the city. I think, yes, it's the narrative kind of reflects what we heard in terms of, or what I perceived as the direction going forward, where it's something to kind of consider in the future, maybe at annual amendment cycles. But it is reflected in the flume a little bit more prominently than your existing plan. So that's maybe a good point of discussion, whether you want to keep some, reserve some areas within the flume is the future land use map for nodes or not. And certainly through the annual amendment cycle or periodic update cycle later, you can certainly revisit it. And, annually you can respond to pressures and applicants on a case-by-case basis. I'm happy to answer questions about manufactured housing if you like, or we can hold off on that.
Are there any questions on the
Yeah.
manufactured housing?
Well,
Mr. Chair,
while
would you like
Aaron's
me to
got the
speak?
microphone, you mentioned the FLUME, the cutest acronym ever, the future land use map. And then
We're full of them.
Carol mentioned like,
Love
when
our
she first
acronyms.
showed up, can you hear me? Wait,
Oh,
Aaron, Carol, when she first showed up, asked about the node shading on the map down in the apartment section she's in. Did you hear what she said, and do you have a response to that? Or the hub,
I
neighborhood
did,
hub?
and yes, Aaron and staff, and city staff and I, we had a discussion sometime about that and how far to go with that or not. And I think the thinking was that someday, maybe, that there could be some smaller scale uses mirroring across the street to where there is substantial retail outside of the city. And that's actually in a different city. Isn't that correct,
Yeah,
Aaron?
it was to be more consistent with, and of course, this is not a zoning map. This is the future land use map. It's a much more
Yeah.
general, broad brush map. And so the thought was, perhaps in 2044, someone would want to put a different kind of use there, and it would allow them to.
You know what, though, I mean, I think there is a real risk to have what we saw today with Carol Simpson, which is including the concept of a neighborhood hub in our future land use map when we're saying in our narrative that this is something that we'll take under advisement in the future. I think that creates some confusion. And I think the idea that this is something that can be in the future contemplated on a case-by-case basis that may require more process with the city council. It may require doing something to change the land use map and change the comp plan. If that's the case, then maybe that's just what needs to happen until the next iteration of the comp plan. But the topic is here, it's open for consideration, but I do think, it might be better to just eliminate it from the future land use map at this point.
Okay. Would other counselors agree with that? Commissioners agree with that?
Yeah.
yeah, sorry, I just have one add. I think on the future land use distribution table, it also called out percentage, so maybe we need to take, I think, that.
Yeah, we'll need to update these.
Does anybody oppose the notion of taking it off the land use map?
Actually, quick question, the upper left, I think that's the Shell station? That's colored in third place, right? But on the zoning map, that's what, mixed neighborhood business. So you could still put a coffee shop there. I mean, there's a kind of a coffee shop there now, right? Okay, yeah.
And can we make that not one shade of pink and another shade of pink? Aaron, do you have go throw a red in there, Aaron, come on.
This is, you can talk to this, Aaron.
Yeah, well, I would just agree with that because I am colorblind and I have a difficult time telling those two colors apart.
It's the same
Honestly,
with the
since-
It's
yellow.
not a colorblind palette friendly.
It's not, well, and the shade
color
is
scheme.
so close to the other one, and it's such a small percentage, both Aaron's, that maybe make it red so it's easier to find, I don't know. Sorry, Paul, what were you gonna say?
Okay, I'm not sure what the commission's desire is in terms of the land use map. Should those pink or zones, whatever color they end up being, should they be reflected on the future land use map? I'm seeing 3 heads nod no.
I would just be curious, Aaron and Aaron, if there's an argument to be made for including that where saying it's something to be considered in the future here, and it's not something we really are doing yet today in the balance of the comp plan. I mean, it seems to me problematic to have it on there, but if there's a counter argument before we make a decision, I'd be curious to hear what it is.
To me, I'll start, but Aaron Qualls is more of an expert than I am. But to me, putting it on there gives more opportunity for the future. We'd still have to go through a zoning change because it's currently zoned R24. So it's a residential facility, so it'd still have that. But if you take it off and we, in the future.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
oh, I was going to say the essential difference is that, you know, those areas wouldn't require a comp plan change, they would just require a zone change. Whereas areas without those designation arguably would, you know, may trigger a comp plan change and zone change. And so it would have to be under the annual cycle along with any other proposals to change the comp plan.
And I hear that, and that makes sense to me. I guess looking at what we've done here, though, you know, we're talking about an area that we heard today is already pretty heavily developed with apartments, and it just happens to be across the street from where you have that kind of a use. The other is where we have an existing commercial station, you know, Shell station there. It doesn't really, I don't see this really opening the door for future uses in other parts of Newcastle, which is where if you really want to talk about doing something different in the community, it would be somewhere other than probably those places. And again, it still presupposes that there is this acceptance of the concept by the council, which we don't know exists yet. So, I mean, I guess I appreciate those comments, but I guess I'm still inclined to probably just take it off the map altogether, personally.
How about leaving only the place where the Shell station is now? Because that's in an area that it's already a node of such. It could be redeveloped into a much more rich node. Whereas the other pink shaded thing is, it's already a node. It's already across from a node. So it doesn't make any sense to lead our residents to think that that's a place where the city would want to put a node. They'd be wondering, what's the city thinking? Right? Okay. All right, so I think we have agreement that we would just have one area in the future land use map that had that color, and that would be the existing neighborhood business zone. Yep.
On a slightly different topic, and Aaron Qualls, I think you mentioned this. I'm going to attribute it to you anyway, even if you didn't. But talking about the vision elements in section 1.2, and not having safety in there, I think that is a miss. I think that's something, and frankly, I'm embarrassed that I didn't catch that when I made other edits to that section. I think there should be a section in there that speaks to safety. Aaron, I think you suggested that. I would absolutely do that.
I agree with that. Commissioners are nodding their heads, so I say yes, let's do that. And we could also have an explanation there about, or an update about the things that happened subsequently and what actions are being taken that are responsive to that concern. Does anybody have comments about other specifics in the land use or the introduction? I have one that Scott and I have actually talked about, but I want to make sure you get yours on the table. Commissioner Lowe?
Yeah, on this page, I maybe nitpicking here. On this page, housing, so if I read here, the middle housing piece, it is such as duplexes and ADU are required. Is that the required through the city or permitted?
They're required to be permitted.
No, that's why I think it's different, right? When you say are required through the city, it's like, those are required. We must have this, but required to be permitted, it's different thing.
Yeah, good point.
It's noted. Now noted.
Can I call it two little things maybe?
What page was that, please?
Page 13.
13. Can you go to page 21?
Okay, thank you.
Oh, maybe 20, actually. I think. Well, actually, I'm not seeing it, but somewhere. Actually, go to 18, sorry. Thank you, jump around.
By the way, the reason you're seeing Michelle Marsh making those comments, it isn't that Commissioner Marsh asked his wife to do his work for him. It's that he was traveling and commenting on two different computers.
Well, I guess I don't know where this is. It's in land use, but there was the sentence that, somewhere in it says, with a moderate increase in housing types within existing neighborhoods. Oh, right there, yeah. I just, is that true? I mean,
Page
that's maybe,
17.
that's maybe our desire. We can't really control that, especially with middle housing. So that was just, well, so the sentence that's highlighted, it says, focused on the downtown area with a moderate increase in housing types within existing neighborhoods. I mean, our desire is to have a moderate increase in existing neighborhoods. But we can't, that's just our desire, I guess. We can't control it. I mean, with the middle housing rules, if somebody wants to pop up a bunch of duplexes around Newcastle, they could, right? So that just caught me as like more of a wish than a fact.
Your question prompts my question, which is based on Scott's, what page are we on, where Scott's comment was, is quote, tentative acceptance really right here? That's kind of what you were talking about with regards to the middle housing and what should go in the neighborhoods, because the sentence says, and this is, I don't know, what page are we on here? It's this page. It says more housing types may be acceptable, but with conditions. And then below that, it says respondents indicated tentative acceptance of introducing additional housing types within existing neighborhoods, but also noted a preference for types. So is that what you're kind of getting at? Like what are the residents interested in doing with regards to this whole middle housing law and where the new housing type should go? Is that what you were saying?
Well, no, I know the residents would prefer the status quo.
Okay.
It's just with the change in the laws, if we can't say no to the permit to put in a townhouse in a neighborhood, right? As long as it meets all the permitting requirements. So that's where this, I don't know. Maybe it's just my interpretation of that sentence, but it just seems.
That statement to me, it's setting up the very last clause, which says the city sees a small but measurable shift in land use patterns. Everything that comes before it is sort of explaining where that shift in land use patterns may come. So I think that's okay. What I find about this that is a little bit misleading is that resident sentiment favors the bulk of new residential development focused on the downtown area, but it doesn't necessarily favor a moderate increase in housing times with existing neighborhoods. So I think if we just,
Oh, that's a good point.
if we just said after downtown area, comma, and with a moderate increase in housing types within existing neighborhoods so that they're independent.
That's a good,
That's a slightly important distinction.
yeah.
And in fairness, so the language here that says new residential development focused in the downtown area, that's an edit that I made over some other language that was in the earlier version. And the intent was what Charlie described when I plugged that other edit
Got
in.
it, okay.
So, yeah, thank you. It's better clarifying
Where
language.
was the sentence, Jim, that you were describing where it said tentative acceptance? Is that still in there?
Just looking at the wrong version.
I'm
Okay.
looking at a sense that, I downloaded everything that was emailed to me, so maybe I've got an old one. This is a Word version that was sent that has Michelle and Scott's
No, it's,
edits in it, but it might be an older version, so it might not be in what we have in the agenda packet.
no, you're looking at the wrong version. That language was addressed.
Got it. There we go.
And I did, since we're on this sheet, or this page, I did want to mention that even though it's not changed, I think favoring is a bit of a strong word. So with resident sentiment, considering the vote, or some favoring.
I think that's a fair statement, though, favoring. I think people, they want the development to go downtown.
Yeah, oh, maybe we took the nodes out. I think that's what happened. Okay, sorry.
edits based on my margin comment, so.
Yeah,
pick that up.
okay. Never mind. All good.
And on this page, I know there is the data, the graph, but on the second
Sorry.
if you go back to the word, so page 18, I think, page 18, I think the word, the second sentence, over half of the land is dedicated to single-family residential neighborhoods. It is correct, but if we look at the data, the graph is actually 64%, right?
Right. Are you talking about the,
Yeah, the
Which one?
19, page 19 is right, the 64%. I just feel like the word over half doesn't necessarily equal to 64. 64
Just-
is more, much
just say
more.
64?
Yeah.
Scott, I'd like to bring up the point that we talked about on email about.
Actually, just gonna do the same thing.
Oh, good. Okay, so let's see, that's
It's on page 20.
page 20. Okay. Where,
That was.
Mike?
You were right. Sorry, I'll turn on here. So the sentence here, the second sentence, it says these plans are still relevant as general guidance to the future of the city, although they may benefit from being refreshed to better reflect actual development patterns and changes to the legal overlay and development trends. So what I had been thinking about, that's language largely that I proposed. The original language read, these plans are still relevant to the future vision of the city. And I was thinking about how the city has grown over the last decade. I think that there were some things that maybe have not developed. I'm not sure that if you wrote those documents today, they would look the same, but that doesn't mean that they necessarily need to be revisited, right? I don't think that that's necessarily something that we are trying to propose here. So I think my comment was a little bit ill-advised, and Charlie and I had some back and forth on that. So I want to be careful. There are changes to the legal overlay. I think we addressed that in other places here. I guess, Charlie, I'd like you to maybe speak a little more articulately in terms of what you think this should look like.
well, I didn't edit a change, I just thought that, I didn't want to invite to reopen the downtown plan. I didn't think there was, anybody had an appetite for that. So maybe just going back to the way it stood before you edited it would be fine. I don't remember what that looked like at this point, but.
It said these plans are still relevant to the future vision of the city.
So the part that would be struck would be everything after the comma? And the sentence after the comma?
I think you could say these plans are still relevant to the future vision of the city, period, and then strike everything after that.
Okay. Yeah,
Oh,
that's good. I'm great. Okay. Okay, does anybody else have any specific comments about the introduction and the land use element?
can I actually ask a question of staff and Aaron Qualls? So I had specifically proposed on page 24, language about, I took some liberties, the paragraph that says, the flume serves as an overlay providing guidance for current and future zoning. And then it goes on and it talks about zoning relative to the land use map and how those two maps are supposed to work together. Did I capture that correctly? I guess I'm just looking for a little bit of a check there, if that's useful and accurate.
Mr. Claus has not seen all of these edits yet, except for what's here. But in my review, I thought it was accurate.
Okay, I'm not seeing anybody else wanting to address specific comments, so I'm going to propose that we change gears here and have a short discussion about the policies crosswalk table to better understand it. And it still seems to be in the middle of development. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done, so it'd be good for us to give some initial reactions to guide the rest of the development. What I would like to avoid is specific direction that this word is wrong, or we don't agree with that, because that would take us the rest of the night. I mean, it's important stuff, and I think we'll have to have that conversation. But so overall, questions about this? Do you understand what's happening here? Is it make sense? Just tell me what's on your mind.
Are you asking about land use or all of it?
All of it. I mean, yeah.
If I may, I also wanted to introduce Zoe Tappert, who is also on the line from SCJ, and she is the one who spent all the effort to annotate this and make sure we knew what was required and everything, so.
I knew
She's on
Aaron
the line.
Qualls couldn't have pulled this off by himself, so Zoe, bravo.
Takes a team of a bajillion.
That's right.
It was quite a bit.
Anyway, please.
Commissioners, this is your opportunity to wax eloquent.
So I certainly won't do that, but I just, at the highest level, and I'm not prepared to speak to any of the specifics of this, and I think you've asked, we don't. I think it is helpful. I think we asked for something like this, and understanding what's in, what's out, based on what was previously in the comp plan, and being able to see it side by side is super helpful. I'm sure it was an incredible amount of work, Zoe, putting this together, and thank you for doing that. And it's going to take a lot of work to really understand it, and I think it's just going to be putting the time in. But as a tool, I think it's fantastic. I'm looking forward to jumping in.
I'll go ahead.
That can't be all we give Zoe. Are you gonna?
Well, no, I looked at this. I had a hard time digesting it. I need like 6 more hours. And I assume the end goal is, Zoe's face is in the way, but that right column. Ultimately, that right column is what's gonna end up, right?
Yeah.
That's the end goal, is those goals and those policies go in the updated comp plan, right? And then remind me again, what's the red shading and the yellow shading in column D? What's red mean?
I can explain that, because I'm the one who did it. So the red it's just not there. That's a policy or a goal that is no longer found in the new. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It may have been consolidated with something else. It might not be needed. It might be something we already achieved as a city. It's now in our zoning code, for instance.
Oh.
The yellow, and there's over here, move from goals to another section. So it was in the goals, but this is really actually a policy. But it's still in the plan. So that was so you could see, oh, okay, here's a yellow one, and now I see it's down here.
Gotcha, okay.
And then blue text, same section. And there's a new section, programs and implementation, where something might have been moved down to programs and implementation.
There weren't programs in implementation before, that is,
That's new.
okay.
New text is just black text with white background. And then specifically in land use is this section that has this blue background with black text. And that's because it felt like some of these needed to be addressed, but they could have been consolidated. And Zoe, I don't know if there's more you want to say on any of that. But give you the opportunity.
Can't hear you,
Let me
Zoe.
come off mute real quick. For those sections in blue, there definitely are areas where we're looking at consolidating or finding other areas where they'd be more appropriate given their specifics, as well as figuring out what is part of GMA requirements, what's part of PSRC, and what some of the main ideas are within all of these that are only slightly different. Just to help make that language a lot more easier for people to understand and have that sort of readability available. So in the comment sections, there's a bit of a discussion on how things are related to different goals that have been drafted in the new plan, and where things might fit in some of these edits, as well as other areas where there's policies that are relating. So that's kind of the discussion that's happening in that blue area.
So Zoe, to I think your point, what I'm hoping I'm hearing, the stuff that is in the blue shaded here, that just hasn't been addressed yet. This is still a work in progress in terms of how some of these other items are going to be reflected in the comp plan, or maybe an intentional decision is made not to include some things, but there's the consolidation. I mean, trust me, with the current comp plan, I did an obnoxious detailed red line of all of these, and this part, that was my big comment, was this is overkill, but I think it's still important those things are going to be added or reflected in ways. So we are still going to see some changes on some of this. Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, correct. That's a work in progress, and some of these areas are requirements through GMA and PSRC. It's just how they exactly get worded and the level of technicality that's needed for a comp plan is getting sorted out here.
Zoe, long ago, before we met you, my comment was, it's so much easier if we could just change the existing document, because who's going to have the time or energy or and intelligence to go through both documents and compare them and draft a document that shows the differences? How did you do this? This is amazing. It reminds me when I go upstairs and there's a giant pile of laundry and I just leave the bedroom because I'd give it up. That's the way I felt when I opened this document. I go, my Lord. So great work. I haven't gotten through it all. I'm impressed, and it was helpful. It's what we were asking for, but it had to be a ton of work. So thank you for doing the heavy lifting on this, Zoe.
Zoe, one of the
Thank
things.
you for the compliments. I will say Erin started the document, so I can't take all the credit.
The notes that say what happened to something that's not in a new plan are really, really important. And the one reason they're important is that some of the things that aren't in a new plan are going to be near and dear to the hearts of somebody in the city who will find its absence to be scary. I'm thinking particularly of the things that are of an environmental nature. And it's going to be really important that we are able to show where those things ended up in a way that shows they were not compromised. So I think, I mean, you're part of the way there in the notes where you explain they're going to end up somewhere else. But I don't think I'm going to be able to rest until I can see where they ended up and see what they actually said. So anyway, I just want, yep.
I think layering on that, I agree completely. And I assume that this table itself, we don't intend that it will find its way into the comp plan. Maybe it will, but at minimum, I think it would be, and I'm not suggesting it, by the way, everybody looked at me with really scary looks, but I think it will be very important to, at minimum, have some sort of a preamble or a footnote or some sort of an explanation. A footnote's probably not going to do it for something of this magnitude, that explains the process that you're doing right now and explains, I think at least generally, is something that addresses Charlie's concern, because I think we all share that concern. If there are things that we aren't carrying forward, people are going to want to understand why those decisions were made when we make, and not the least, City Council is going to want to understand why we have not selected to put certain things forward. So I hope that there's some sort of a narrative explanation or something that helps to support that. So.
This document may, while it may not end up in the comprehensive plan, I think it would be an important part of, in the public review, which right now we're hoping to start on October 1st, where people just have a month to go through all this stuff. And that's when people will take the time to look at this.
Hey, question for you guys, though. So this was a lot to soak in, and I know we've each sort of taken an element or two. So when I look at land use or I look at housing, it's, I don't want to say it's Greek, but there's a lot of detail there that I've been sort of relying on like you guys to look at. So how can I help you? Like, or how can we help each other, like, make this a better document? Because I don't want land use to all fall on Scott's shoulders, for example.
So I mean, I guess I have two thoughts. I think I feel like I'm stepping on your toes here, but I think that a way that we all should be approaching this is, as you're reading the narrative piece, I think I would come to it as a citizen first, the first time you read it. And if you're coming to it with fresh eyes and you're just trying to understand what the vision is for the city around economic development, right? Is it there, right? Do you understand what's there? Does it make sense? Are you getting lost in statistics, or do they tie out?
Yeah,
things like
certainly,
that, right?
yeah.
Can you understand it? And then I think with regard to the policies, I think as we do this review, I think looking at the gaps, it's a gap analysis, right? The things that we've had and the things we're gonna have, and where do they differ? And are there important things we're missing, or the things that we're adding? I mean, is there a reason for it, right?
Right.
And are we in agreement on those things? And I think we all need to do that for everybody's element, just to be a reality check. That's the way I would approach it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Contrary to me stepping on my toes, I'd characterize that as a foot massage. I would say the exact same thing. I think that you perform a real service by looking at it like a citizen, like someone who isn't
Right.
been steeped in this.
Okay, fair enough.
I'll answer your question by sharing something I did recently. Normally, I like to watch Netflix fun movies, but I found a riveting YouTube video, Vimeo, right, of Dow Constantine, all these mayors and wonky people talk. It's the GMPC. You probably know what that acronym is, don't you, Aaron? Yeah. So I watched the GMPC meeting hearing for damn near 45 minutes, and I couldn't believe, I mean, these people speak a different language. It's all acronyms, and it's very wonkish, but because I'm just trying to, if you want to help, figure out where we're headed, right? Like, 'cause we know we took the survey data, we have the conversations we've had in plain English. What's been hard for me really, especially with the introduction of the whole King County element, which is layered on top of the state law element, because if it wasn't for the state law, if it wasn't for the King County rules, we'd do whatever the hell we wanted, right? We're Newcastle. We make Newcastle the way but we have state requirements, we have county requirements. So I've just been trying to study those to see where we can mesh the two things, or I guess the three things now. So good luck if you want to take a look at that, because that's been the most confusing part for me, is trying to figure out Because you have everybody saying, I want this, and there's all these different opinions, and that's hard enough. But when you try to get these people to marry up with the state requirement, the county requirement, that's what's really been a difficult thing. And that's where we're relying on Tyler and Aaron and Zoe and Bill and everybody to try to, and then to present it to the council in a way that they can understand what the heck we just did. So good luck. It's been messy and boring. But I don't know if that answers your question, Paul, but yeah, it's messy.
Okay, I sense that we've given all the input that we can give you on the crosswalk. It's 7:30. I think, shall we attempt just to go through the housing, and maybe we can get through that and call it a night? Okay. So,
Charlie, if I may, and I'm sorry to interrupt. But
Go ahead, Bill.
I just want to have one more comment on the crosswalk before we left it. Is that early on in our relationship here, you voiced a concern that we had policies that seem to be redundant and not necessarily work well together in the plan. We look at each element by each element. And so what we're trying to do with this is to show our work as we begin to do that consolidation so that we have a goal that maybe serves the needs of multiple elements. So we come up with something that is clear and efficient, but then also trackable. And listening to what you were saying here in the conversation, maybe this is something we put in as a plan appendix so that we have an opportunity to see how the old became the new and then translates into the new policy framework.
could you repeat that last sentence? I'm not sure I
That's all
got your
was gonna
point.
say.
You're talking about, did you say we should put this in the plan? Did I hear you say that?
As an appendix.
You may have heard me say that, but I was saying perhaps as an appendix so we can demonstrate, somehow illustrate the tracking from the old to the new.
Got it. Okay, moving to housing. I think we should probably just go right to specifics. So keep in mind again that the version you see, it may still have, I'm not sure which of the edits made it through, but I'm assuming that most of them did. There may still be some questions or highlighted changes. If you disagree with those changes, then speak up. If you approve of them, then we can just consider them approved. Consider them to be, no objection to it at any rate. But, so, whoever wants to start, feel free to start.
You should put first, it's yours.
I was trying to not speak. Okay, Scott, I'll go. As I mentioned, I watched the videos of the folks from King County and all the mayors and the conversation. And as near as I could tell, this is not math. This is art. This is very subjective. The goalposts are moving constantly, and there's committees and different. And there's letters you can pull up from different cities and jurisdictions asking for exemptions and changes in standards and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like I've from the get-go been pretty straightforward and strong with how I feel about this, that first and foremost, the survey is the most important thing. It's the foundation of the whole process, and I think we did a dang good job of promoting a very good survey and got a lot of feedback on it. The survey, unfortunately or fortunately, doesn't always align with the video. I watched the folks because they're very invested in providing more housing for people that couldn't normally afford to live in the city of Newcastle. I couldn't afford to live in the city of Newcastle at the prices they are today. So the question is, how do we put the square peg to the round hole? I read through everything. As maybe Paul mentioned or Charlie, it feels like it's a vast improvement over what we first got. I understood what was said. I didn't have The second version I was much happier with, and I didn't feel like nitpicking it, Chair Gatzik. I really didn't. And so I mean, you saw, I emailed back you and Aaron. I didn't go through, I mean, I don't love everything in there, but I know it's required. And I'm not quite sure where the goalposts are to get this through this committee, this King County committee. I don't think anybody's fully sure of how the state law affects the different municipalities, because this is only fresh off the presses. So my feedback is great job to the folks that adjusted to all the different requirements and requests that those of us on this table have asked. I did not redline it. I thought we'd have a conversation around it, but no. Beyond saying it's complicated, hard work by people who understand this topic much better than I do, and my only charge in this whole matter is to try to reflect the comments and survey results. I don't have anything to add beyond that. I really don't. I think they did a great job.
Commissioner Lowe.
Yeah, I would like to go back, my earlier comment on the manufactured homes. So I think, I don't know which page, but it's a policy 7. Basically, it says the cities, I think, will encourage manufactured home as single-family home when we build. Sorry, I was referring to the Excel, the cross, P7, HOP7. What does that exactly mean?
Yeah, so this policy actually is no longer in our existing comp plan, or in our proposed comp plan. But the reason for manufactured homes is, that I understand, is that they are, because the plans are already ready, they're much less expensive to get built. And so when you're trying to get, and they can actually look really good. And I'd be happy to share some examples if there's a concern. But really what it is, and Zoe put in this note about how PSRC would like to see language addressing expand housing capacity for moderate density housing. The city already does not, I'm going to say this actually in the positive. The city does allow manufactured homes as long as it meets the building code right now. So if we were to put a policy or a goal in here that said that we don't want to allow it, I think we would have some challenges, and I also think, we would have to actually repeal it from our zoning code to make it consistent, our zoning and building code. But the point is to allow different types of housing and different types of housing that can be built quickly so that more people can afford to live here.
So I guess it educates me. Do we have, like today, what particular, like in our land map, do we have identify the space for manufactured home, or we are saying they can also be built in the current existing single-family neighborhood?
So they could be built in existing single-family neighborhoods, but it's worth noting that manufactured home is really better thought of as a construction technique at this point than, that picture of what you have from the past is not really how they all look at this point. I think, for example, of my grandma lives in New Jersey on the shore, and her neighbor got her house washed out in Hurricane Sandy. And the house that they replaced it with was a manufactured home. The only way I know that is because I knew of it at the time. If you go by the house now, the style is the same. It actually looks much nicer than the non-manufactured home it replaced. They built it in a quarter of the time, and there was no, it was 100% compatible with the neighborhood around it. And frankly, that house, if it were in Newcastle today, no one would know. And so I think we want to, if you're looking for keeping a certain style out, then that's one thing, but we don't want to get rid of the entire construction technique, because we may be over legislating.
Yeah. And these are on permanent foundations. These aren't mobile homes, which sometimes the city used to have a couple of mobile home parks. We don't not allow them in our residential areas, but we don't have mobile home parks any longer that I'm aware of.
So, like today, I mean, moving forward, we will allow 2 dwelling units in one lot, and the people can have one manufactured home and one existing home, something like that.
So the units would have to be attached, or it could be like a single family, what you think of a standard single family home and like an accessory dwelling unit. So 1,000 to, we'll talk about that when we get to middle housing, but 1,000 to 1,500 square foot space, smaller space. Maybe that would be modular construction, but it would still be manufactured construction, but it would still be the smaller on a permanent foundation.
Any other comments about the housing element? Yes.
I was going to just say that one, excuse me, that element was so easy to read, so that's a compliment to whoever put it together. That's one of the best elements I thought, because I looked at it as an outsider reading it, and it was explained everything very easily, it was easy to follow through, so that was well done.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Oh, I just wanted to kind of add to the manufactured housing question. There, as I think Aaron and Tyler alluded to, there are restrictions in state law about regulating designated manufactured homes differently than single-family homes. It's really the devil's in the details in your zoning code rather than a comp plan policy. There are, and I think you have those provisions, it sounds like, in your zoning code. There are things you can do to regulate them, such as require that they be 2 sections and not single wides, and have it be on a permanent foundation, and any design standards that you have in a single family zone would also apply to them. But just to reiterate, they have protections in state code, and that they really, and as Tyler mentioned, they even look and function the same as a single family home. It's really the way they're constructed. And yes, they are often confused, and I deal with this for my on-call clients with mobile homes, which do not meet HUD standard. And before, I'm going to say 1976, any mobile home is not considered a manufactured home. There's a real difference, and a lot of it has to do with life safety issues. And the other thing that people often confuse with this are RV parks, and sometimes tiny homes on wheels. That also is not included in a manufactured home definition.
Commissioner Marsh.
So, word of warning, I went through and I made notes and questions as I read through this. So I actually have a number of things that I could ask about. I'm happy to, if it's easier, to just submit them in writing, but okay, here we go. Just from a style standpoint, starting on page 30, there is an extensive quote to the RCW, which I think is great. I think it's long enough that it's a little bit difficult to understand where it starts and where it ends. We might italicize that or do something in the formatting to set that off. I think it's confusing.
Are we looking at that on the screen now? I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Page this right here is what it looks like.
Let's make sure everybody can see the same thing, so help us find it on.
It's on page 30.
Yep, all of page 30.
It's all of page 30 and into page 31. Yeah. It goes to the end of the quote there.
Okay. Let me recommend that we just indent that, all of that.
Okay.
That would solve it. If everything following neighborhoods and starting with A yeah.
Yeah, I would just change formatting there so it's clear. I wanted to call out on page 31, right after that citation, there's phrasing here that I haven't seen or heard us use here about the city must establish credible plans that make it possible for the private sector or public-private partnerships to build the housing that is envisioned. We've talked a lot about accommodating future growth, but I actually thought that this was a very nice way to phrase this, and I wanted to point that out. The footnote here, also on page 31, I'm a little bit confused about why it says all of these modest missing middle housing types must be allowed except where prohibited by existing home. I mean, I understand the context of the sentence. I guess the phrase modest missing middle housing seemed a little editorial to me. I might just say all of these middle housing types must be allowed. That's just my personal take on that. I'm going to jump forward to page 34. And this is language around housing affordability and mortgage payments. And I think I understand what's being said here, but there's a line in here that says that this equates to a mortgage of approximately $5,000 to $6,000 a month. And then down below, there's a footnote that says depending on APR, down payment, other fees and factors. I mean, I think this may be right, and I think it's useful to have some sort of touch point in here. I mean, I don't know if that's a 15-year, 20-year, 30-year mortgage. I have no idea what the assumptions are for a $5,000 to $6,000 a month payment on these terms. And I think it's, I understand what was trying to be done there, but I don't know if that's on point or misleading. I'm not saying anybody's trying to be misleading, but I just don't have any idea. I don't have enough context there to know what's happening. Further down in that section, housing is considered to be within the household's budget when monthly payments are at or below 30% of a household gross income. I think that's all fine. But then there's a line here that says Newcastle may therefore become increasingly unaffordable to many residents who currently reside there. And I was wondering, I was trying to understand the logic on this. Is that based on increased property taxes that the total cost of housing is going to end up being higher and higher? So people who could afford to buy here 20 years, 30 years ago, maybe with increases in property taxes, they're retiring. I was trying to understand that sense. Newcastle may therefore become increasingly unaffordable to many residents who currently reside there.
Yeah.
And if it's the tax burden, I guess I'm wondering, does new housing stock change that here? Or is there maybe a logical disconnect in that paragraph? I had a hard time following what was happening there.
So if I can speak
Yeah.
to that just a little bit, you might have suggestions for rewording. So the idea in this, and sorry, that was me extrapolating from some ideas and trying to fill things out. But with the $5,000 to $6,000 a month, that was just a calculation based on a 30-year standard mortgage. And then the housing is considered to be within the budgets. And then becoming increasingly unaffordable has to do with this graph below, and you can see how housing prices have gone up by so much and incomes have not. So we're seeing that houses are increasingly just out of reach for even people who could afford to move here 10, 15, 20 years ago.
That's what Jim said a few minutes ago.
Right.
Right, but we're saying, the sentence here, I guess, Newcastle may therefore become increasingly unaffordable to many residents who currently reside there. We're really talking about people who want to move here, not people who already live here. If you're
Right.
talking about increases in home prices, because increases in home prices aren't affecting my mortgage from 20 years ago for what I
Right.
bought.
Yeah,
But I think
unless they rent.
right.
Unless they rent and they're looking to own.
Right, but we're talking about home prices
Right.
here.
And there's even the nuance that like people who live here today couldn't necessarily afford to live here today. Yeah.
Which I think if that's what we're saying, it wasn't clear to me that that was what you were saying.
Yeah.
I think it makes sense that people who,
I agree.
it's an
this needs to be
increasingly,
phrased.
it very definitely is increasingly a smaller number of people in the region that can live here. But I was confused by how that was constructed.
Yeah.
Maybe a fix for that would be to just say increasingly unaffordable to the same types of people who currently live here, or the same income level of people.
Income level, maybe, yeah. Yeah.
Aaron, I have a question. The committee that reviews our comp plan, what do they look for? Because I've had a lot more comments and suggestions and frankly pushback in the past, but then when I realized we're going to have to appeal to this committee, this King County committee, I feel like we kind of make sure we have to, it changes everything, right? I mean, our focus, the bar goes up for this being an acceptable comp plan. So I was reading that and I was assuming that was kind of a reflection of what the expectations are of this King County Affordable Housing Committee or whatever it was, or the GMPC. So how much does that play into the wording that we're reading here? And I know they've approved some comp plans already, Aaron, so maybe can we see what language they're looking for and how much we have to adjust our language to make sure they give us an approval letter?
Yeah. Aaron, do you want to speak to that at all? Or do you want me to?
Sure. Just for clarity, the Housing Committee of King County does not approve your plan. You have to make sure your plan is consistent with King County countywide planning policies. And they advise cities on how to do that. And we have taken their guide sheets and we have incorporated them into your plan. If your plan is deemed inconsistent by a party of record that decides to challenge your plan, likely you would go before the Growth Hearings Board. We don't want to do that. And so we want to make sure they're consistent with King County planning policies. But it's not the county that really approves your plan. You approve your plan, but if it's shown to be not consistent with the Growth Management Act or King County countywide planning policies, you could set yourself up for some trouble.
What does
Zoe,
that
did you want
mean?
to add to that, or is that?
Yeah, no, but please, you kind of got to the best part of the
I'd say
movie.
that-
What does that mean? When you said we could go before the Growth Hearings Board, I didn't know that was a thing. And you said, we don't want to do that. So what happens if we do that?
It would cost the taxpayers money and legal fees, and you would have to probably make changes in accordance with the GMA and countywide planning policies. You'd have to go back and revise your plan and spend more money and time. And so I'm assuming you don't want to do that. Zoe, did you have something to add?
I was just going to say that King County is really just looking for consistency with their CPPs along that way. And with the sheets that they have, it's a similar crosswalk to PSRC and the GMA on just where things align and having all those boxes checked of like making sure things blend across ideas and jurisdictions. So that's really the purpose from those, I'd say.
And as I understand
It's just a little bit tedious of a process. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, there's a little delay
Thanks, Zoe.
when people on Zoom land speak, so sorry for, but anyway, as I understand, King County has a specific 0 to 30% income focus. So that's kind of where some of that, we're talking to that a little bit more in here.
Sorry, it's going to take more than that to derail me. So page 36, I love the timing on this because the very first sentence says the regulatory bodies that must approve Newcastle's comprehensive plan, Puget Sound Regional Council, King County, and the Washington State Department of, I think it's Commerce, although we need to complete that. It sounds to me, if I understood what I just heard, maybe we need to redraft that because it's not actually approval. We need to show consistency. Is that right? Or,
Yeah, it's different levels. Actually, Zoe probably.
That's
knows.
correct.
It's the lag. Zoe, you just went through this with Woodinville, right?
Yes, I actually just finished some of their stuff on Woodinville housing and going through the checklist. It's again just kind of like checking the box to ensure consistency. It's not an approval, it's more of just making sure everybody's on the same page when it comes to how folks want to coordinate housing. So,
It's review, it's maybe, there are regulatories that review for consistency, and then there's the certification that I believe comes from Commerce. So Commerce is going to be looking to make sure that we're consistent with the RCWs.
oh, sorry.
One quick question for Erin. Erin, on page 34, and I don't know, I should have asked before, that mortgage, I'm just curious, 5,000 to 6,000, does that also include the property tax, monthly property taxes, or is just the mortgage?
Oh, see, I should have taken a screenshot. I think it was the property tax. I can either redo this calculation. It was kind of a quick thing that I did,
That's okay, yeah.
but I
just
think
curious.
maybe it would be better to just talk more generally about it, or see
Yeah.
if I can find something that someone else has done.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Commissioner Marsh.
I'm going to try and make it quick at this point. So I'm actually going to jump to the appendix, which I guess I'm just going to start by saying I thought it was very interesting, very detailed. And I only had a chance to read through the appendix once. I have some questions and I actually want to go back and reread it a couple of times because I think that there's a lot of stuff in here that's important. I guess just as a general comment, I thought that there was a lot of data in here, but I found myself at times a little bit confused in terms of what the data was saying and how that intersected with the narrative. And I guess I feel like I need to go back and satisfy myself that I understand that a little bit better, but I struggled with that a bit. So I think I'm gonna limit my comments at this time to say that, except on page 39, in the third line of the first paragraph where we're referencing Washington's Growth Management Act, and the third line that says in accordance with the act, I would capitalize act there. Now I'm done.
Stepping on my toes.
I know.
Okay. Other commissioners, are there things that you would like to comment on in the housing section, housing element?
Come on, please, dear God, somebody after all that.
Okay. Well, I think we have covered, we've been very efficient with our time tonight, and we got through what we thought would be the two most challenging elements in one meeting, which bodes well for going through the other elements. Let me just see, do you have the appetite for continuing tonight, or would you, if we were to continue, this is what I would propose. If you have all read the parks element, I would move to that one. But if you haven't, then I don't think we should do it. And if you have the appetite.
I have the appetite, I did not read it.
Chair Gatzik, also of note is that our parks planner for the city and Newcastle Trails will be getting together. They have a date to discuss comments between them, and there may be edits.
Okay,
further
that's a good
edits.
reason not to do it tonight. Okay. Well, then I would propose that we call it a night's work. Yeah. As far as reviewing the elements goes. However, we should talk, we do have more on the agenda tonight. We have additional public comment. I think I would, I would like to talk about the planning calendar before the public comment, because I think that might inspire some people in the public to comment. So let's just do a quick agenda switch here and talk about the planning calendar.
Do you want me to start?
Yes.
Yeah. So of course I put a calendar together, a draft one, and forgot to get it in the packet, but it's basically what's on here, on your screen right now. So in an ideal world, we would get to the first meeting for adoption with council, not to say that that's the last, but the first one on December 3rd. But working backwards, you know, everyone saw where we are tonight. How do we feel about potentially having a 30-day comment period in a month? At the same time, we would be submitting to Commerce a draft. That's not to say we couldn't make some changes, they just couldn't be very substantive. Like we'd have to keep the same ideas.
When does it get to council?
So it would get to council. Well, we all wanted to do a meeting with council, right? To give an update. So we need to decide on that date based on our meeting schedule. I would say a good time would be sometime around the 30-day comment period. Then looking in November for a special meeting with an open house and public hearing, because our regular meeting is the 27th, which is the day before Thanksgiving, and I doubt anybody's going to want to come.
So we're having a conversation. So am I hearing we're going to give it to the public for their feedback simultaneously with giving it to the council? Or because I'm unless the council's like, great job, well done, I'm assuming they're going to want to make some tweaks. They always do, right? Or maybe they won't.
Yeah. And let's see if our consultants are still on here.
Well, let me point out that the public comment period may raise issues that the council will want to know about.
Okay.
Right. So there's that, and we have to give it to Commerce 60 days before we're even thinking about adopting it. So we can't give it to council to potentially adopt unless we've given it to Commerce 60 days beforehand. So it's kind of a catch-22. So that said, yes, so then we would have that 30-day public comment period, and we could start incorporating those ideas, any ideas that come out that haven't been captured to date. This is a little bit ambitious, but as long as we understand that it's still a working document as we go through it. And so that's where I'm trying to gauge Commission's comfort level.
When do you think we would have a much more fully developed crosswalk so we could really see what happened with each of the policies that were in the old plan?
We still have Zoe online. Not to put you on the spot, but I am.
And then a related question is, if we were to make a change in the policies, is that a substantive change that would affect the Commerce submittal? If we were to do that after it went to Commerce?
I think as long as the RCWs were captured, if we made policy changes that were for our own city, I think that would be okay.
I would agree with that sentiment there. If it's subtle language tweaks that capture the same idea, that should be fine.
How do you feel, Zoe, about the crosswalk and sort of a completed version of that? Do you think that's going to be available for September? Do you have a meeting on the 12th? we would want to get it to the public ideally the Friday beforehand or the Monday morning at the latest before that.
So that'd be September the 9th, looking at that with calendar.
Yeah. Does that seem ambitious? Oh,
I think so.
okay.
I think I can
Hi, Zoe.
Put
It's Jim again.
some serious work into things, yeah.
Here's my 30-second summary of what I'm feeling. Remember when we first started this and I said, for God's sakes, let's get this done early so we don't have to scramble at the end? Well, hell's bells, guess where we are now? I feel like we owe it to the public and to the council. I'm not saying tonight, but I feel like we should, just buckle down. We got 2 new commissioners. Let's buckle down, get this damn thing done, and get it in the hands of the council so they can weigh in with more than just, tweaks. And the public can get, give it a good once over. So I'm cool with, I'm not speaking for the people around me. They may say, shut up, Quig, I don't want to do this. But I feel like we should meet as much as necessary, push our consultants to do their job, and get this thing into the hands of the public, into the hands of council, so they have time to make some thoughtful comments that aren't just tweaks around the edges. But if they really, have something that's going to take us a meeting or so to implement, that's my 2 cents. I'm willing to double our salaries to make this happen.
I'll have to check with council on that.
So the council is not going to just get it on the December 3rd.
I know.
They have the opportunity to read it at every stage in the game, and I think the council members are astute enough that they will start looking for the things in there that they are going to object to, if they were going to object. They're going to be looking for the things that, make them uncomfortable. They're not going to be able to debate it until maybe December 3rd. And so then it would be a question of how much time does it take for the council to, a majority of the council, to make a decision on a particular thing.
I guess my question is, why do we have to wait till December 3rd for that? I mean, why can't we make it, October 20th or something for them to have this quote-unquote debate? Or that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, say that last question again?
I mean, if we have to get this done, by the end of this year, which I don't even know if that's really true or not, but if we have to get it done by the end of the year and we have to have the city council vote, we need 4 people to vote yes for it. We need them to feel convinced they want to vote yes for it. I just want to make sure we get it in their hands early enough so they can get the changes they need to get to those votes.
Yeah.
And if December 3rd is too late, then make it November 3rd is what I'm
Oh, I
wondering.
see. Well, December 3rd is the earliest we could adopt it. That doesn't mean we can't go to council before that. So it's just assuming that October 1st is about when we would get a draft to the public and to Commerce for their 60-day review. So, yeah, if we want to add a meeting in here.
That's what I'm saying, add a meeting.
Yeah, I thought maybe I got lost in all the dates, but I thought that, Aaron, did you mention possibly having some sort of a meeting with council in October?
Yes, yes,
Okay, so that's-
somewhere around the.
Wouldn't that address, at least to some degree, what you're talking about, Jim?
Yeah. As long as, I guess I'm hearing, what I'm worried about is hearing, council can make some minor tweaks and comments, but they can't really do anything that matters. I just would feel bad if we're gonna wait till the point that they can't really make us, but if we're giving them time to give substantive comments and be able to talk to their constituents and get feedback, and we can go back and forth and do it right. I just don't want to rush it because we didn't want to have an extra meeting in between now and whenever we're going to give it to them. But maybe I'm probably misunderstanding the schedule.
Yeah, and I'm happy to reach out to our planner at Commerce and confirm with her what level of changes we can make, or what they're looking for. But I think really what they're looking for is that we hit the RCWs. And if we hit those, then we get certified. So if we make changes, we probably won't be making changes to policies that are specifically there for it to hit the RCWs, I assume. We might change a word, we might say critical area instead of wetland, but, yeah.
So I think at the one point, we are planning to have a joint meeting with council. Is that the October timeframe?
So that's what I was wondering too, was where we would want that. I think at one time we were talking about either the beginning or the end of the public comment period. Of course, at the beginning would allow us to present what they're going to see. At the end would give us an opportunity to tell them what we heard. But that's not that we couldn't have a report or something to council as well at the end of the period if we decide to go at the beginning.
Why are you looking at me just because I'm the chairman?
You're the chair, buddy. I want us to have a meeting with the council at the beginning. That's my 2 cents.
Agreed.
Okay.
So what date, I mean, what time period are you thinking, Jim?
Depending on what the final deadline is, just, and enough time, like, I feel like I've said this too many times, enough time for the council to feel like we actually gave a crap what they wanted and what they thought. You know, do it in a thoughtful, so if we have to jam in a meeting or 2 extra, so we can get it in the hands of the council, so they can have time to read through, because it's hard enough for me to read through, and I've been doing this for a year now. Imagine them looking at it. I just want to make sure they have enough time to read through it, get some comments, give us some questions. We respond to the questions. So whatever we have to do to get through the remaining elements, I mean, we managed to get to the tough ones early, like you pointed out. Let's see if we can get through the remaining ones quickly. Push Aaron and Zoe and Bill to do their jobs. We get this all figured out. We have that joint meeting with the council sooner rather than later. And then we're ahead of the ballgame instead of behind is what I don't know what date that is, but.
So assuming we have a joint meeting with the council earlier, that still doesn't, they still have to wait till December 3rd, do they not? For adoption? What's causing the December 3rd date?
Assuming we don't send this to Commerce before like October 1st, and so their first it's the 60 days
Okay.
requirement.
So I think it's, I don't know, I mean, we could try to get it to Commerce sooner, but I think we're going to need those special meetings because, and we'll finish by October 1st, but I think that's still going to be hard work. Yeah. So the time that happens after October 1st, there can be conversation. And maybe, there's that conversation would lead us to want to make a change in the plan that could still be made if it doesn't conflict with what Commerce would have to approve. So does that sort of speak to having some kind of meeting in October?
That sounds great. I'm simply saying, we've been using these surveys and feedback as our guiding light. But if 4 council members saying, have something in their mind they really want to get done, and we don't have it in there, or it's wrong, it doesn't get passed, all of a sudden we're out of compliance, right? So I just want to make sure we get their feedback. I know we've gotten a letter. I mean, we've gotten some feedback, but I think it's important for us to have that joint meeting sooner rather than later. Sounds like we're on track for that. That sounds great. So thank you. I just wanted to voice that concern that we do it too late to the point where they can't really have any feedback. But if we're on track to get it done on time, that's great.
So unfortunately, one of the council members who's been closely tracking our progress is here tonight and has been here many nights, and will have a sense of what the council needs, and will, I'm sure, be advising us about that at some point.
But procedurally, though, if we meet with the council in mid-October, after the 30-day comment period started, can we listen to their input and make updates? Or is at that point it's kind of set in stone? I mean, I'm wondering what we can do. Like if
the stuff, if I heard correctly, the stuff that Commerce is going to care about, which is the RCWs, which are the legal requirements, and I'm assuming are non-negotiable by and large, those are going to be baked in by October 1st. And I think if we have a joint meeting, I think it would be helpful for staff and our consultant to be there. I suspect that they will, to be able to say if issues are brought up that are driven by the RCWs and their legal mandates. I suspect that early October, those will be baked in, we'll know, they'll be raised in the joint meeting, right? The other, if there are other things that come up that are not legal mandates, and it's part of that feedback cycle in the month of October, it gives us a chance to respond to not just the public feedback that's gonna come from the 30-day comment, but also from council's first real opportunity to get into a complete document, right? And if they're seeing themes that are problematic, I think the earlier we know, the better.
Well, but I guess that's what I'm asking. If there's a 30-day comment period and we get comments from the council, we get comments from the public, then can we, based on that, make changes? And does it then start another 30-day comment period? Like, I'm trying to, I don't think you can just change it after the comment period, can you?
I would think so. Aaron, are
I
you
mean,
there?
I'm just, I don't know, I'm just trying to make sure we're following.
Yes.
Hi. What's the procedure for having a 30-day comment period at the same time that you have something at Commerce? And if there are edits that need to be made? Do you know?
Oh, with the public?
Yeah.
You mean for SEPA or for the, just your local ordinance requiring a comment period?
Yeah, so for the 30-day comment period.
It can run concurrently, I think is the,
Can we edit the document after the 30-day comment period if it's already at Commerce?
you mean the 60-day comment period, the 60-day review period?
Well, we would have a 30-day comment period for Newcastle, for the public,
For the public.
and then there's the 60-day Commerce
Oh.
submittal.
Those can run concurrently.
What if there are substantive changes?
And I mean, it just depends.
Okay.
I would, you would have to ask Commerce if there's major changes. I don't think it's anything you're gonna have to worry too much about. We've been pretty intentional about, meeting required policies and GMA requirements, countywide planning policies. So, I mean, if the change was out of alignment with one of those, with the GMA or with the countywide planning policy, then you may have to reinitiate it or deem. But if it'd have to be pretty significant for you to have to reinitiate the 60-day review. It's not. It's a bit of a gray area. And I don't know if Bill or Zoe, if you've had experience before where you had to reinitiate comment with Commerce.
No, I've never had to reinitiate comment with Commerce. The Commerce comment is usually helpful. Yeah, they'll say, here's where you comply, and maybe here's an area where you can strengthen your policy. But they leave it fully up to the local jurisdiction on what it is they're going to adopt. Now, Aaron, you pointed out if there is a public comment that the city receives that the council would be interested in incorporating into the plan that is a violation of an RCW requirement, then I think that's just something staff would have to recommend they don't do. They still can do it, but they do run the risk of being taken to task.
Yeah.
But you don't have to reinitiate a 60-day comment period.
Let me see if I can summarize for the
I
commission.
don't know if that gives you the answer that you need, commissioners.
The commission, while Commerce is reviewing it, Newcastle will be reviewing it. Newcastle could provide feedback that would prompt us to make changes. We can make those changes, otherwise why would we ask the public to review it, right? That's why we're doing it. We can make those changes, and if they are significant enough that they would trigger an additional review by Commerce, then they would. Otherwise, but we would hope that they wouldn't be of a nature that would require a resubmittal. So sometime in November, we would be considering the results of that public feedback we could be making changes at that point, and that would be part of what we would be submitting to the council on December, for consideration on December 3rd, but probably not until after the special meeting, which is the public hearing, which is another requirement that we need to have on this whole thing. There's a public hearing that'll be November 12th, 14th, to the 20th. And probably after that public hearing would be when we would pass something or vote on something that would go to the council, and which could be different from what was submitted to Commerce.
And I want to ask you this really quick question, hopefully yes or no question. We will actually meet with the council earlier than that, initially. Okay.
I just want to confirm what.
Mr. Chair, if I may,
First, Commissioner Lowe, and then we'll go back to you, Aaron.
So are we saying we will have a joint meeting with council before we submit the, to the Commerce for the 60-day notice?
Before we submit it to Commerce?
Right?
Just barely. So the council meeting is October 1st, and we would need to submit by October 3rd. So we would need to, staff would probably need to make any changes based on that meeting. If, for instance, I know something that's been brought up in the past was a compost program. And if we failed to mention that, you know, we would want to put something in there to make sure that that was addressed.
Is October 1st, is that a Tuesday? Is that a scheduled council meeting?
It is, so we would go to the regular council meeting is what we
Okay.
would do.
But if the commission needed to take action on something before it went to Commerce, we couldn't do it at that meeting. Could we take an official action at a joint meeting?
I think so. That's Clerk Westman? We have a question about actions. For this commission? If we took the draft comprehensive plan to council and we wanted to make changes to it before we submit it to Commerce, does that require a special meeting to make those changes? Can we decide to do it at the city council meeting? How is that done?
This commission would have to have its own meeting to change, right? That you all would have, we can't have two meetings going at the same time. So if you, does that make sense? That if you all are, unless I guess you could call it a joint meeting of the two where there's consensus in the room, but that doesn't feel like it's a regular meeting type, that's a special study session. So if I properly notice that there's potential action, we can take action at a special meeting. Seems like it's a little bit of a, if you all want to take action at a meeting, then it has to be at your publicly noticed meeting. I don't know, sorry,
Oh, that helps. So we
So
could,
just publicly notice a meeting for the day after the Tuesday meeting. Have a Wednesday night planning commission meeting on the calendar. If we don't need it, we'd cancel it, right?
we can do that. Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Okay, so we meet with the council, our joint meeting, October 1st. If we need another meeting to make a change, we have a backup meeting on the 2nd.
And I'm going to ask our about procedure a little bit more internally. And I'll send an email out to everyone. I want to find out.
Okay, I think we've covered the calendar, correct? Let's open our second public comment period. Would anyone in the audience like to address the commission?
I think I got a subtle invite anyway, even if I wasn't planning to.
So if I have my imaginary wrench, let me throw it out there for you right now. But, so every week the city manager sends out a report to the council, like a summary. And this one, I had to go back a little way, but last month he wrote, and I'll summarize, basically he said, our schedule will get pushed out a bit. We still plan to have the update in front of the council for possible adoption by the end of 2024. However, if we need a couple of meetings in 2025 in order to get it adopted, we should be okay with that. Now, that's pretty clear to me, like the December 3rd that you seem fixed on seems pretty flexible according to what he wrote here. So it sounds to me like the 60-day doesn't have to start like when you say it has to start, unless, I'm gonna treat this as a question and answer. Is that true? Is it the 60 days, can it be pushed back? And if so, it seems like we might need to do that.
Ideally, we would, and that's a question I actually have. Ideally, we would make it to the December 3rd meeting to get something in front of y'all to show our effort to get it adopted by the end of the year.
Sure.
But a question I also have is if in the ordinance, if we can change the effective date. So, okay, we go to council on December 3rd, but it's not effective until December 15th. Well, it's still effective on time. So that's a question I want to clarify too.
Okay, so further on, he writes, note that we already anticipate an amendment to our housing element in 2025 due to the backlog of review that the county currently has. So two things there. It sounds like we submitted, let's say, on October 3rd, and the county may not be even able to look at it. It sounds like they're full. But are we saying that we're going to skip something in the housing element because we don't have time to look at it? I don't understand that comment.
Yeah, so the county will be reviewing just the housing element, but the 60-day review is for the state, for Commerce, the Department of Commerce. And so that's the one we're looking at getting kicked off. The county has already said, and this is the Housing Committee through Claudia Balducci, she's already said, their group has already said, if you give it to us now, essentially, you should be anticipating to incorporate our comments in a amendment next year.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so to me, as, just speaking for myself, but it seems like there's a little bit of flexibility here to push this back a little bit. And the spreadsheet that you showed here tonight, I know it's still a work in progress, but we'll have a meeting tomorrow, the council, and I'm going to mention that. And it's not on our schedule right now, but I would ask maybe if tomorrow at the council meeting, if we could tag team to remind the other council members to start looking at this stuff. I've been kind of giving hints, but I don't know if anybody's taken me up on it. But make it really obvious that the rest of the council really needs to start to dig into the material that you've already presented, even if it's not fully edited and fully vetted out, but to get some ideas. But again, that's thank you for all your efforts, appreciate it. And whatever the council can do, whenever if we want to have a meeting, we'll have the meetings, right? It's important, so we'll fit that in wherever we need to fit that in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Fitzgibbons, I still like the idea of getting this to the council on the 3rd. That way, if they need time, they can go into January. But it's good to know that they then have time, that they don't have to, they can take whatever time they need, and then we have the flexibility for that.
Yeah, we still want to have this adopted ideally in January. But if it goes into February, I don't think at this point it's going to hurt us. Mark, that's famous last words, right?
Would anyone else in the audience like to make a comment? Okay. We'll close the public comment period. I want to express my thanks to staff and the commission for their work before tonight and tonight. And with that, we will adjourn the meeting.
Thanks, SCJ.
Thank you, Zoe.